Scientists have never found evidence that Noah's flood covered the entire Earth. But archaeologists did find something almost as strange: Noah's story, written on clay centuries before the book of Genesis. A man warned by a god, a giant boat, his family and the animals brought aboard, a catastrophic flood, birds released to find dry land, and the man's name was not Noah. In fact, he was not even the first. This is one of the strangest things archaeology has ever turned up. Not a boat on a mountain, but a story, older than the Bible, telling the flood we thought we already knew. To understand it, you have to start with the science everyone argues about, and then follow it somewhere almost nobody does. So, was there ever a single worldwide flood, one that covered every mountain on Earth and wiped out all life but one family? On that, geologists are about as united as scientists ever get. No, there is no layer in the rock, no global signature, no line in the Earth's crust that records the whole planet drowning at once. A flood that truly covered the world would have left its fingerprint everywhere, and that fingerprint is not there. But here is the part the headlines miss. Science did not find one drowned world, it found many. Because while there was never a global flood, there were very real local ones, and some of them were catastrophic enough to end an entire world. In the 1920s, the archaeologist Leonard Woolley was digging at the ancient Sumerian city of Ur, in what is now Iraq. Deep beneath the streets, he cut through a thick layer of clean, water-laid silt, evidence of a major flood. Woolley interpreted that deposit as evidence tied to the biblical flood, and for a while, much of the world believed he had found it. Later archaeology told a more careful story. What lay beneath Ur was a real disaster, but a local one of the great river floods that drowned the plains of Mesopotamia again and again. Not the whole world, but to the people who lived through it, a flood that swallowed everything they knew would have felt exactly like the end of everything. And there may have been larger catastrophes still. In 1997, two scientists, William Ryan and Walter Pittman, proposed that Mediterranean water once broke through into the Black Sea basin, rapidly flooding inhabited lowlands. Later research challenged just how sudden and how catastrophic that event really was. But the pattern behind it is what matters. This was a land that flooded and flooded and flooded. Cities vanished under water and silt, and somewhere in that drowned landscape, a story began to travel. A story of one survivor and one enormous boat. However these stories began, eventually they were carved into clay, and in 1872, one of them came back to light in the most dramatic way imaginable. A young scholar at the British Museum named George Smith was studying broken tablets brought back from the ruins of ancient Nineveh, covered in cuneiform, the wedge-shaped writing of Mesopotamia. As he worked through one of them, he realized what he was reading. A flood. A man told by a god to build a great boat, the saving of his family and the animals. And when the waters rose, the hero releasing birds, a dove, a swallow, a raven, to search for dry land. It was the flood story, in almost every beat. But it was not from the Bible. This was the Epic of Gilgamesh, and its hero was not Noah, but a man named Utnapishtim. The story goes that Smith was so overwhelmed by what he had found that he leapt up and began tearing at his clothes in the middle of the reading room, because he grasped at once what it meant. Here was Noah's flood, written down centuries before the book of Genesis. And Gilgamesh was not even the oldest version. Dig further back into the clay, and the same basic story keeps returning, with different heroes and different gods. Before Utnapishtim, there was Atrahasis, in a Babylonian epic nearly 4,000 years old. And older still, in the Sumerian tongue, a king named Ziusudra, warned of the coming flood and told to build a great vessel. Ziusudra, Atrahasis, Utnapishtim, and eventually, in Genesis, Noah. Most scholars see the flood story of Genesis as belonging to this much older Mesopotamian tradition, a story the whole ancient Near East was already telling long before it reached the Bible. That does not make the biblical version a worthless copy. Cultures inherit their oldest stories, reshape them, and make them their own. But it does mean the Bible was not the first place this story was told. It was one of the later versions of something already ancient. Now, you will often hear a much bigger claim attached to all this, that every culture on Earth remembers the same great flood, and that this proves it truly happened, everywhere, at once. Be careful with that one. Flood stories are common, but that is no surprise for a species that has always built its cities beside rivers and coasts. Many of these myths arose completely on their own, out of local disasters, not one shared global event. The flood stories most closely related to the Genesis account come from a single, flood-prone corner of the ancient world, Mesopotamia. And that leads to the honest heart of this. Science did not set out to disprove Noah, and it did not. What it did was stranger and quieter. It did not find one flood that drowned the world. It found a world where flood stories made sense. A land swallowed by water again and again, where stories of a great deluge, a survivor, and a boat became some of the oldest flood traditions humanity ever wrote down. So here is my question for you. If the story of Noah was already old long before the Bible took the form we know, does that make it less true? Or does it make it one of the oldest and most enduring things our species has ever remembered? Tell me in the comments. I read them. And if you like the ones where we pull the real history out of the headline, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.